Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Valentino. I'm an academic counselor in the Hagen Dean's office. This is our final installment for this year for the Full Spectrum series. We've got a lot of great feedback, so we appreciate those who are able to attend in person and also those who are viewing this asynchronously and the feedback that you've given. We're really excited about this because it's going to be a resource for as long as we can to come. And we have discussions about possibly doing something similar to this over the break. So stay tuned for that. We'll be sending more information via our Instagram, our Facebook, and our YouTube channel. So selfishly, I'm very interested in this series today, this meeting today, because material science is the thing I know the least about. My training is not in engineering, my education not in engineering, but after listening to a lot of discussions about students and their work, I feel like I can kind of figure out what ballpark I'm in, but I'm really excited about material science because from what I read, it is such the students who do go into this really enjoy it and love it. So we wanted to give the opportunity for you to learn a little bit more about this. Today we have Dr. Danielle Benoit, who has appointments across the university and is also the director of the materials science program. So Professor Benoit, I'm going to turn it over to you for the program.
Great, thank you, Nick. And thanks for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about the program that we have in material science. So it's a very multidisciplinary program. So bear with me as I find my screen. Now, you have to give me feedback. Are you seeing the PowerPoint? Okay, great. I'm just making sure because I have two screens going and so I never know if they need to be swapped out.
No, it looks great.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nick. So material science is a very broad scope. So I'm hoping to give you a sense for the program in material science at the University of Rochester, but probably more globally first, what is material science and what do we think about in terms of the breadth of material science? So first I wanted to share with you our short mission statement. We have a more in-depth one, but as this is a very interdisciplinary field, we have developed this through the cohesive efforts of everybody in the program. So through interdisciplinary education and research, achieve breakthroughs in material science and engineering to make our world ever better. And so if we look at the campus, so this is both Med Center as well as the River campus, which we all know and love. Material science is probably a little bit over here. So we have a home in Wegmans Hall, and it's not pictured here on this map. I should probably update that, right? But I do want to highlight that this program is affiliated with Hagen, of course, but also the School of Arts and Sciences, the School of Medicine and Dentistry, and encompasses also faculty that have their research programs at the Laboratory for Laser Energetics as well, which isn't pictured here either on the map. But we emphasize the application of science and engineering to the understanding of materials. And in terms of educational offerings, we have a minor as well as offer a master's and doctoral programs. And there's over 60 labs that again encompass this wide swath of research at the River Campus Med Center, Laboratory for Laser Energetics, where you can have additional exposure and focus your education, whether it's the minor, master's, or PhD degree with these research experiences. So there's a lot of opportunities to really gain depth and breadth in material science. So what is material science? So it's a branch, of course, of science that focuses on materials, and it's very interdisciplinary. It's often very application oriented in terms of the materials and material properties that are necessary. And of course, much of that is rooted in physics, chemistry, engineering, and many other subfields that of course intersect within this discipline. And you can also define it as this relationship of material properties to their composition and structure, and not only from subatomic scale to macro scale, and looking at chemistry and you know, a variety of properties in terms of materials. And what's a material science, or maybe I should say, who is a material scientist? I am a material scientist, but there's so many others, of course, at the university. It's a person who uses their combined knowledge of physics, chemistry, and metallurgy to exploit these property structure combinations for applications that are so wide ranging, from, you know, developing the next greatest circuit board, to developing materials for the next stealth fighter, to, you know, developing drug delivery systems for the body. So it's a very wide swath, but you know, at its roots, all of those applications come down to the structure function property analysis and how to understand that. And I wanted to talk a little bit about history, because we know that materials drive innovation. So, you know, all the way back, you know, in the literally the Stone Age. So that is a material. And so, you know, some of our, you know, oldest ancestors used materials, and their ages were defined by materials and material properties, and how the materials were able to be used through the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, steel, now silicon, and now nanomaterials, moving towards the future. And so, you know, it's really interesting to think about materials and how important and pervasive they are in our society. And when we think about the tenets of material science, you think about the performance. So you have some sort of application, and you need the material to perform in a certain way. So there's design parameters. So if you want to put it into an engineering standpoint, and therefore from that performance, you need to think about, well, what kind of properties do I need of my material, and what kind of environment does it need to withstand and perform in? Does it need to be mechanically strong or flexible, or does it need to have electrical capabilities, thermal, magnetic, optical properties? Does it need to be clear in the particular application that you're thinking about? Processing, so are you going to make it into whatever you need it to be to deploy it in whatever application? So can you process it into that geometry, that complex geometry, to fit whatever application? And also thereby the structure. So the arrangement of the internal components of the structure, the subatomic structure, all the way to the macroscopic structure, all of that combines and needs to be characterized to ensure that your material performs in the application that you deemed it necessary for. So it's a complex intertwining of all of these aspects that determine, for whatever application, the material and material platform that one would choose. And of course, there's so many different materials, and I'll talk about the three major classes, but these can also be combined in lots of different ways to make composites. So metals, ceramics, and glasses, as well as polymers, are the three main classes. And for metals, they're typically have, you know, similar properties of conduction, you know, can be susceptible to corrosion. They're strong but deformable, and some applications include in the aerospace, and, you know, of course, in our wiring, also buildings, of course, based on properties. Ceramics and glasses, they're typically insulating, resistant to high temperatures, very hard but very brittle at the same time. And of course, we can think about applications, you know, domestically as well as in more high performance applications using ceramics. And polymers are large molecules, and low density, low weight, can be flexible. They can have some very, very unique properties, polymers, depending upon what they're made up of in terms of the individual units and how they're put together. And of course, we use them widely in cars even. So many of our bumpers are made of plastics, and a lot of inner components of cars are made out of plastics. even some fabrics, so polyester, for example. And then, you know, our fast food containers, et cetera. And everybody is well aware of the various polymers that exist, or plastics, if you want to use the common nomenclature, I suppose. And the length scales of material science are wide-ranging as well, going from atomic and subatomic all the way to macro scale. And the properties of materials, you know, really can change pretty dramatically across those scales. And when we think about those scales, you know, at the subatomic, it's how, you know, the different bits of materials come together and bond. And I'm showing here a typical sea of electrons that's found in a metal architecture, all the way through to how those atoms now stack together in that atomic organization, the microscopic, so what those materials look like on a microscopic scale, and then bulk properties. And we already talked a little bit about optical properties and how, as you layer on this complexity and how you put together your material, you'll get different properties, and really highlighted by the aluminum oxide, which is just is a single crystal in the fully transparent version, and then has increasing crystallinity, which causes it to be more opaque as that builds on. So that's my brief introduction to materials, and it you know, it sounds very broad because it is a very broad discipline. So to get into more specifics about what we offer at the University of Rochester, I want to highlight our undergraduate minor and some of the requirements for the minor, as well as the master's degree and PhD, to just give full disclosure, I guess, for our offerings at the university. So first, in terms of the minor, so this has a lot of information on it. It's all available on our website. So, but I ended up just dumping it all here to have it be complete. So there's 16 credits total that's required for the minor. So there's an introductory to material science course, and then there's you can take any one of the 3 thermodynamics courses that are highlighted here. And then 2 of the following in this very long list. And what I will say for disclosure is that I put the MSc listing, so the material science listing. Many of these are cross-listed with other departments. So for example, biomedical nanotechnology also has a BME, I think it's 421 designation. So so you might know these from their home department, if you will, designation. So one is to take 2 of these listings, and one of them has to be at least the 400 or 500 level. So those are the requirements. And I should highlight that the introduction to material science has some prerequisites, but many people already in an engineering program have attained those prerequisites. And some of them can be given permission to, I guess, not have the long list. There's about 6 prerequisites for this class. And so with permission from the instructor, you can also enroll successfully in this class. So that's the minor. And in terms of the master's degree, there's a couple options. We have a thesis-based option and a coursework-based option. Both are about 30 to 32 credit hours, depending upon which you decide to pursue. And, you know, like many of our courses, there's formal coursework, as well as some research, and research could be taken for credit for both of these plans, where research would be more of a focus in Plan A, of course. And then for the PhD, similarly, coursework, and I don't list the courses here. There's many of them, and some that overlap with the minor, of course. But 90 credit hours, much of that in the research realm, and of course, at the end, writing up a thesis and defending that research. Some of the requirements are shown here, but I don't have the long list in terms of graduate courses. So MSc 480 is a material science course, and that's only if you haven't had a basic undergraduate course in materials. And then thermodynamics, there's a few options. You take one of those. And then structure property relationships, also there's a choice between a couple of the classes. And again, there's a whole slew of other classes that you have to pick from in terms of the portfolio classes, and that's detailed on our website. So if you have interest in looking at that, I suggest looking there. So in terms of research, whether you're interested in material science, just generally in terms of a research area, or pursuing a minor, or pursuing graduate study, we have a wide swath of research labs that you can participate in. So there's about 62 affiliated faculty. This, might be actually a little bit higher at this point, but from 12 different academic departments. So kind of get a sense for how multidisciplinary this research and research focus might be. And this, of course, includes HAGEM, the School of Arts and Sciences, the Medical Center, and the Laboratory for Laser Energetics. And to just give a brief highlight in terms of some of the topics of research that one could get into at the University of Rochester, we have interdisciplinary research groups that we have developed as a part of the material science program to kind of get some cohesion in terms of the different topics. So one is in artificial intelligence and machine learning and biomedical materials design, materials under extreme conditions, quantum materials, sustainable materials, materials for energy harvesting and storage, as well as materials processing, manufacturing, and scale up. And we have different leads, faculty leads for each of these groups that kind of give some cohesion to these affiliations of faculty and research areas. So I do highly recommend, I think material science is best when you get to dig in and get to apply it to some extent. And so I highly recommend exploring options where you can use your interest and leverage your interest in material science to really get an exploratory and investigative aspects and work in that area. So that's all I have prepared. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that have come up, either in the chat or from the people that have joined us, or others in the audience. I'll do my best.
I actually have a question, and I wanted to see about, we have so many of our students, both prospective and current students, who are struggling to find their trajectory through their education and how it ties to their interests. So can you walk us through from the time that you were a senior in high school until now, in terms of how do you get to this point where you have this degree of focus and specialization in this area?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I guess I wasn't quite prepared to talk about myself. So for me, as a young person, I was always, taking things apart, building things, tinkering, whether it be mechanical, electrical, you name it. And I, really enjoyed, figuring out or trying to figure out how things worked, I guess. And I really enjoyed applying that to biological systems, I guess. Although, I liked all of the science. I think that I had some really wonderful teachers along the way. In particular, I really struggled, but really loved chemistry. And I think that, that class in particular set me on a path of a very rewarding paradigm, I guess, of, the classes that challenged me the most and were the hardest. I really struggled with them, but it was so rewarding when it clicked, and that rush of, oh, that's how you solve this problem. That is so cool. And I think that I was really benefited by, teachers that really nurtured that type of approach. So I was not a student where things were easy, and I was, but it was really the courses and material that were hardest that I liked the best, because they were a challenge. They were, a hurdle. Ended up kind of picking engineering by accident. The science, yes. I mean, I kind of expected that I would probably be a biochemistry major or something like that. But I saw how I could make engineering into a career if I didn't end up going to medical school, which is what I thought I would do. And I saw that as a safe choice, a challenging choice, but a safe choice, because after an undergraduate degree, I could no longer be dependent, I guess, on my parents. Like, that was like a real big thing to me, that I wanted to be an independent person, and I wanted to, be able to have a career. If all that stuff after, my undergraduate degree didn't work out. So yeah, I ended up in engineering kind of by accident, and loved it, of course. And continued to love it so much, and got involved in undergraduate research in materials, and continued to nurture my interest and passion in research, and had good mentors as an undergraduate who said, you should go get a PhD if you like research, because as a MD, that you're not going to do that as readily. Like, that's not really the first responsibility of an MD. So I took their advice and applied to graduate school. And even at that time, I knew that I wanted to do something with stuff that I could build. So materials that in some cases I couldn't see, because we work with nanomaterials, but I knew they were there because I could test their properties, right? So yeah, that's kind of how, I navigated the path to at least becoming a PhD with a focus in materials. And yet I was able to nurture also the passion, or feed the passion, that was applying this in healthcare, so biological systems, by pursuing tissue engineering and drug delivery, both in kind of separate training opportunities. So, and I still get to do that today. So it's pretty cool to be able to continue to innovate and really be at the forefront of using materials in applications in biological systems and healthcare.
Thanks for sharing that. We have so many students who think, because of the curriculum of engineering is so much straightforward, that they feel a lot of times like they have to have everything figured out in the first day in terms of what they're going to do. And your being able to pivot and change based upon your experience, I think is going to be really helpful for students to hear. What other questions do we have?
Let me ask Danielle, if a student gets a minor, right, how is there a path to sort of building from that minor to a master's degree, and how would that pathway work if a student wanted to do something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So absolutely. Whether it be at the University of Rochester or otherwise, some of the credits can transfer in. So only Gina may know the specifics, but I know that there's a certain maximum number of credits that could transfer in. But as you saw, some of the classes that one would take as a minor, somebody seeking the minor, at least one of those classes has to be at the 400 or 500 level. And so that undoubtedly would transfer in towards that master's degree or PhD degree, depending upon which program. And I can speak to our particular program that a certain number can transfer in, but that's different compared to some other programs perhaps. So I think it does directly translate to not only being able to defray the credits that you end up taking in your master's or PhD degree, but also allowing you to get more depth and breadth in the classes that you do take, because you would have that background already. So I think in both of those veins, it would be a benefit for our students.
What do you think is the biggest are the biggest misconceptions about material science for students who are entering into it?
Oh, I think often students have misconceptions in terms of thinking about macro. They often think macro in terms of material science. So and often forget that at the root of everything really you have these particles and subatomic particles that really how they come together and build up into and form into the final product is really what's underpinning the properties of that material, and why you would choose one material over another or try to tweak some of those like inner workings of materials. So there's an awfully lot of chemistry and understanding even wave theory and physics that underpin many of the properties that you want in your macro scale, or maybe even nanoscale, whatever your final product happens to be, or your final material happens to be. There's a lot of very basic ideas in terms of chemistry and physics that drive you to that point. So I think that often students think on that more macro scale, but forget that, oh yeah, there's chemistry that underlies all of this. And even, especially in the context of polymers, there's a lot of chemistry that underpins a lot of that. And so I don't want to scare anybody away, but it's a really important thing to consider, that chemistry is and physics are both at the root of materials.
What other questions do we have? You can put it in the chat, or you can unmute if you'd like to ask a question.
So let me ask you one more question, Danielle. So one of the interesting things about your presentation of materials is all the different interest areas. So I can imagine a student saying, well, that's really cool, but now I've got a problem. I'm interested in doing the minor, but now I've got a problem because I don't know which of those areas to go into. Where are there people? I mean, should they contact you? Where should they go?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So definitely contact me, contact, John Lombropoulos would be a good person, Professor Lombropoulos in mechanical engineering, who has overseen the minor actually for a number of years, because it needs to be, it's actually placed within mechanical engineering. I'm sure you know that, Paul, because it needs to be affiliated with a major. And so it's affiliated with mechanical, but it truly is part of our program. And so, any of those leads that I highlighted would be great people. Anybody really within material science would be happy to talk to students to kind of narrow in on the foci of, because there's such a portfolio of courses that you could take as part of that minor, and trying to figure out, you think engineering is broad. Well, material science is equally as broad, I would say, in terms of the types of courses and the types of focus that you could have. And so trying to narrow that down, definitely the leads would help with that very much. And they're very broad leads in terms of home departments, that range from physics all the way to chemistry, all the way to engineering, many of the engineering disciplines. So I think that you definitely, and don't just, talk to one. I would say talk to a few different ones that pique your interest.
Can you let us know what areas of industry or what companies that the students who have done the material science minor have gone on to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have people at Intel and Google and Corning and B&L and, so all the way from local to much more global companies. And I think that, somebody with interest and a background in material science, depending upon the focus, could go into many, many different types of industries. And of course, we have good placement in graduate studies as well.
Do we have any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, Professor Benoit, for coming in and talking about this. It's very exciting to hear about the interdisciplinary part of this, especially because so many of our incoming students want that, partially because they're interested in more than one thing, but also the idea that, we have such a view of the engineering curriculum being so linear that it's the opportunity to be able to branch out into something, especially if it's not your focus of your major. But so thank you so much for doing this, and thank you all for watching. This is the last session of the Full Spectrum series, but as I said in the beginning, we hope to be back and in different ways. So thank you all for watching. We will post this on our Facebook, our Instagram, and our YouTube channel. If you have questions, I will also put Dr. Benoit's contact information so that you can contact her directly via the page. But thank you all for watching, and thank you, and we will see you soon.
Great. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you all.